Have you ever imagined that your own son's birthday party, a day that should have been filled with laughter, joy, and family love, could turn into the most humiliating moment of your life? My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 68 years old, and I thought I had already grown used to loneliness after my husband passed away. But I was wrong, because sometimes the deepest pain doesn't come from loss. It comes from the very people you raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for. That night, the upscale restaurant in Denver's Cherry Creek district sparkled with crystal chandeliers. Glasses of red wine shimmered in the hands of the guests. My son Daniel sat beside his wife Vanessa, her glittering designer gown catching the light as she laughed and toasted with friends. I wore a simple navy dress, old but precious because it carried memories of my late husband, Robert. All I wanted was a warm family dinner. But with just a few cruel words, everything collapsed. Vanessa narrowed her eyes, smirked, and right there at the crowded table, she dropped words as sharp as a knife. "You'll end up dying broke and alone in that shabby little rental apartment of yours. At least then, you won't be embarrassing us anymore." The entire room went silent. The clink of a spoon against a plate echoed like a hammer strike. I turned to Daniel, praying my son would defend me. But he didn't. He only looked down and muttered softly, Maybe it's time you considered moving into a nursing home. It'd be safer for you." In that moment, my heart shattered. I had worked double shifts, sacrificed every ounce of myself to raise him, to give him the education that made him the successful lawyer he is today. And now, in front of friends and family, I was nothing more than a burden, something to be discarded. But let me tell you this. In that darkest moment, another fire lit up inside me. I decided I would never let anyone else dictate my life. And soon, they would learn the truth that the woman they thought was weak and pitiful was hiding a secret powerful enough to change everything. That night, I walked back to my small apartment in South Denver. The streets were empty, streetlights casting long shadows of me across the sidewalk. Inside the living room, Robert's old armchair still sat there silent, like a witness to all the years gone by. I sank into it, my hands trembling as they gripped the worn armrest. Vanessa's cruel words kept echoing in my head like a wicked refrain. "You'll die broke and alone." I cried harder than I had in years. But through the tears, I suddenly remembered Robert. Before he passed, he once told me, "Margaret, you have to live for yourself. Never forget you deserve happiness, no matter who turns their back on you." His words felt like an invisible hand lifting me up. I stood, walked to the safe I hadn't touched in years, and opened it. Inside were stacks of documents, investment papers, stocks, and savings accounts. Everything Robert had carefully prepared for me, 3 decades of planning and discipline. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the numbers. Over $2.5 million. In that moment, I realized I was never poor. I had simply been hiding my true strength. And now, it was time for Daniel and Vanessa to see exactly who I was and who they really were. The next morning, I called Richard Collins, the family's longtime attorney. His voice was warm, yet firm. "Margaret, are you saying you want to change your will?" "Yes, Richard. I want Daniel and his wife erased from it. I want everything to go to the Horizon Foundation, the one that supports abandoned seniors. I've lived in lies long enough. It's time to put an end to it." There was a pause. Then Richard replied, "I respect your decision. This isn't just legal, Margaret. This is justice for your life." 2 weeks later, I signed the new will. It felt like a weight I'd carried for decades had finally been lifted. I was no longer the weak woman crying in a shabby apartment. I was Margaret Hayes, independent, wealthy, and unshakable. I began searching for a new home, and the moment I stepped into a mountain estate in Boulder, I knew it was mine. 6 bedrooms, a sprawling garden, windows opening to the majestic Rocky Mountains. Morning sunlight flooded through the glass. I smiled, closed my eyes, and whispered, "Robert, do you see this? I've found my home." A month later, I moved in. I bought elegant furniture, rehung treasured paintings, and placed Robert's photo right above the fireplace. The house pulsed with life, and more than anything, I felt reborn. But that joy didn't last long. One afternoon, Daniel and Vanessa suddenly appeared at the gate, wearing smiles laced with calculation. They praised me, flattered me, and then slipped in the suggestion, "This house is too big for you, Mom. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we all lived here together? Vanessa and I could take care of you. You'd never be lonely again." I sat back in my chair, calmly poured the tea, and looked straight into their eyes. Inside me, there was no anger, only a chilling clarity. I knew then, the real battle had just begun. Vanessa dropped her designer handbag on the table as if the house already belonged to her. Her eyes swept across the living room, gleaming walls, brand new leather sofa, wide windows opening onto a sunlit garden, everything reflected in her gaze, as though it were merchandise on display. "You're so lucky, Margaret," she said sweetly, though her smile cut like a knife. "This house is perfect for a family, especially a young family like ours. Isn't that right, Daniel?" Daniel shifted uneasily, tapping his knee like a lawyer rehearsing an argument. My son, the boy I once held after he was bullied at school, now sat across from me, hesitating before siding with his wife. "Mom, I think Vanessa's right," he said, his voice low but steady. "You can't manage a mansion this size all by yourself. If you let us move in, we could take care of you. And maybe you wouldn't feel so alone." I sipped my tea, the warmth in my throat clashing with the cold in my chest. My eyes locked on his. "Take care of me, or take over my life." The air froze. Vanessa let out a mocking laugh, masking her unease. "Margaret, don't misunderstand us. We only want what's best for you. Just imagine you'd have the downstairs, while Daniel and I, and the children soon enough, there will be children would fill the rest. Their laughter would bring this house to life. Isn't that what you've always wanted?" I stayed silent, letting them believe I was considering it. But inside, memories of the birthday party, Vanessa's cruel taunts, Daniel's silence came rushing back. I knew they hadn't come for love, they'd come for conquest. Finally, I set my teacup down with a sharp clink against the wood. "You're right. Families should care for each other. And yes, I've dreamed of hearing children's laughter in this house. But..." I stood, walked to my desk, and pulled out a thick folder. When I placed it on the table, both of them leaned forward, eyes wide, as if treasure lay inside. I opened it slowly. "There's something you need to know." Inside were the new will and its addendum. I slid the documents toward Daniel. His eyes widened as he read, while Vanessa leaned in, her face shifting from curiosity to shock, then burning rage. "What is this?" she snapped. "You cut us out of the will?" I nodded calmly. "Not just cut you out. I've left everything to the Horizon Foundation, a charity for abandoned seniors. And if either of you dares to contest it, you'll forfeit the right to ever step foot in this house again." The room exploded. Vanessa slammed the papers down, her eyes blazing. Daniel sat frozen, his hands trembling. "Mom, you can't do this," he pleaded. "I'm your only son. This is my right." I met his gaze, my voice steady as stone. "Being my only son doesn't give you the right to treat me like a walking wallet. Blood doesn't excuse disrespect. Family isn't entitlement, Daniel. Family is love, it's respect. And you and your wife forgot that a long time ago." A heavy silence fell. Vanessa clutched Daniel's arm, whispering fiercely in his ear, urging him on. But this time, I caught something flicker in Daniel's eyes, regret, or maybe just fear of losing everything. I turned away, walked to the window, and gazed out at the garden bathed in late afternoon Sunday. Behind me, Vanessa's voice still hissed with fury. But inside, my heart was calm. I knew then, this battle had only just begun. After the tension snapped like a taut string, the room sank into silence. Only the ticking of the wall clock filled the air. Vanessa shot to her feet, her face flushed red, eyes blazing with fury. "You'll regret this, Margaret. When you're old, sick, and all alone, you'll beg for us. And by then, no one will come." I turned and looked her straight in the eye. For the first time in years, I felt no fear in the face of her insults. My voice was low, but unshakable. "No, Vanessa, I won't regret it. Because what I need isn't a house full of people, it's a heart that knows how to love. And that's something the two of you abandoned long ago." Daniel sat frozen, his hand covering his face. As Vanessa kept shouting, he suddenly raised a trembling hand to stop her. "Enough, Vanessa!" His voice cracked, heavy with exhaustion. "Mom's right. We were wrong." Vanessa glared at him, then stormed out, her heels striking the floor like blows against my chest. The door slammed shut, leaving only silence between mother and son. I looked at Daniel, and in his eyes I saw confusion and despair. "Mom," he choked, "I know I've been silent too long. I let my wife humiliate you. I let her speak from my heart. But I'm still your son. I don't want to lose you." My chest ached. I had longed to hear those words. Yet now they came too late, tangled in memories of all the times he had turned away. I sighed. "Daniel, I don't hate you, but I must protect myself. I spent half my life sacrificing. The other half, I will live to be respected. You need to understand that." He bowed his head, his shoulders shaking. Maybe it was regret, or maybe just fear of losing his safety net. I wasn't sure anymore. That day, Daniel left without another word. I walked him to the gate, watching his figure fade along the tree-lined street. A deep sadness pressed into me, but so did a sense of release. In the weeks that followed, the mansion slowly became a true home. I opened my doors to old friends, hosted book readings, planted roses around the garden. I joined the Horizon Foundation, the very place I had left my fortune to, and they welcomed me like family. One afternoon, seated in my private library, with sunlight spilling across the tall shelves, I realized something. I was no longer alone. I had built a life grounded not in bloodlines, but in sincerity and respect. And I want to tell you, anyone listening to my story, never let someone define your worth by your age, your circumstances, or the sacrifices you once made. Blood alone can never excuse neglect. True family is built on love, on kindness, on respect. If you ever find yourself in the position I once was, remember this. You have the right to stand up, to protect yourself, and to live a life worthy of who you are. I lifted my gaze toward the window. In the distance, the Rocky Mountains shimmered in the glow of sunset. I smiled, whispering as if Robert could still hear me. "Do you see me now? I've found myself again. And at last, I'm no longer afraid of being alone." Time passed, and I grew accustomed to my new rhythm of life in the Boulder estate. Each morning, sunlight streamed through the glass windows, flooding the room with the fragrance of lavender drifting in from the back garden. I brewed a cup of black coffee, sat by the window, and watched birds soar across the sky. This peace, something I had lost for so many years, was finally mine again. I was no longer the woman humiliated at a birthday party. I had changed. I hosted book readings for neighborhood children, opened an art class for single mothers, and became actively involved with the Horizon Foundation. This house, once a symbol of wealth, had transformed into a center of joy and generosity. One afternoon, while arranging fresh roses in a vase, the phone rang. It was Daniel. His voice was rough, hesitant. "Mom, can I come see you?" I paused. Images of that night at the party, his silence, his averted eyes as his wife mocked me, flashed in my mind. "Still," I answered, "Yes, Daniel, but only you." That evening, he arrived not in the sharp suit of a successful attorney, but in a wrinkled shirt, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. For the first time, I saw a brokenness in him I had never seen before. We sat in the living room. I poured him tea. The silence was thick until Daniel finally spoke. "Vanessa left me, Mom. When she realized I had no future with your money, she walked away. And I lost everything." I said nothing, my heart torn between sorrow and resolve. "You know, Mom," he continued, his voice cracking, "I was wrong. I stayed silent when I should have defended you. I let money and pride blind me. I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I want to change. I want to be your son again, not for what you have, but for who you are." Tears welled in my eyes. These were the words I had longed to hear, yet I knew trust could not be rebuilt in a single moment. "Daniel," I said slowly, "I'll give you a chance. But this time, love cannot come with conditions. Are you ready to accept that everything I have belongs to the Horizon Foundation, not to you?" He nodded, his eyes red, but filled with a sincerity I hadn't seen in years. In the days that followed, Daniel began visiting more often. No talk of money, no mention of the house. Instead, he worked in the garden with me, joined me in community projects, and sat with me in conversations that no longer carried the weight of resentment. One evening, as the Rocky Mountains blazed red beneath the setting sun, we sat together on the balcony. I turned to him and said, "Daniel, I've learned something. Family isn't an entitlement, it's a choice. We choose to love, we choose to respect, and only then can we truly call it family." He squeezed my hand and whispered, "Mom, I want to choose again from the beginning, if you'll let me." I gazed out at the mountains, their peaks glowing gold in the last light of day. My heart softened. I knew the road to healing would be long, but at least The door had been opened. My life had entered a new chapter. The grand estate that once drew envy now overflowed with laughter, the smell of fresh-baked bread, and warm gatherings filled with kindness. I no longer saw it as property, but as a home to be shared. Horizon Foundation began sending volunteers, and together we planted gardens, turned part of the library into a community space for abandoned seniors. Each afternoon, I listened to life stories, laughter mingled with tears, and I realized I was never truly alone. Daniel also came by more often, not to demand, not to calculate, but to learn how to start over. He helped me plant flowers, sometimes sat quietly as the elderly told their stories of war and youth. One evening, as I watched him in silence, I saw not the ambitious lawyer or the failed husband, but the little boy who once ran into my arms after school, simply needing his mother's love. Still, I harbored no illusions. Broken trust takes time to mend. I chose to forgive, not to ease his conscience, but to free my own heart. Because holding on to bitterness only ages you faster, while letting go allows you to truly live. People often ask me, "Margaret, do you regret cutting your son out of the will?" And I smile. No, I don't regret it. Because it was never about punishment, it was about protection. Protecting myself, protecting the worth of my life, protecting the people who will one day find refuge within these walls. And I believe many of you listening to my story may see a part of yourselves in it. Perhaps you've been belittled, used, or treated like a burden by the very people who should have cherished you. But remember this, you have the right to stand up. You have the right to say no. And most of all, you have the right to live a life worthy of your value. Family isn't just blood. Family is respect and love. If someone cannot give you that, then they're not family, they're just familiar faces. Don't fear being alone. Loneliness among those who despise you is far more painful than solitude with freedom. And so, I'll leave you with the same question I once asked myself the night my daughter-in-law humiliated me. If one day your own family disrespects you, will you stay silent just to preserve the word family? Or will you rise, reclaim your voice, and protect your dignity? Leave your answer in the comments below. I truly want to know what path you would choose. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit like, share it so others can hear it too, and subscribe for more stories that might mirror your own life. Because sometimes, just one story is enough to change the way we see love, sacrifice, and courage. And maybe, just maybe, your story could inspire thousands out there.